Hello, and welcome to this version of Open Evening for the English Literature A-Level and English Language A-Level at Bay House School. My name is Glenn Tapp, and I'm the subject lead for those subjects. Okay, so subject overview. We offer two courses in English, two separate A-Levels at Bay House. You can choose to do either one, or you can take them both. And that's English Literature A-Level and English Language A-Level. The questions that we field mostly at a face-to-face open evening for a lot of candidates coming from GCSE when you have to do both is which of those A-levels should I take? What would suit me best? And this is what you need to be thinking about. What are the differences between the two? Are they similar to my GCSE studies? What will they help me study at university? And how should I decide between them? And for the next few slides, that's what I'll be trying to take you through. Okay, so firstly, what are the differences between the two? Simply put, literature is the study of books. We read a selection of poetry, novels and plays. We discuss them in class. We write analytical essays about them. It really helps if you like all of these genres, though we have found that students tend to change their mind about certain types of literature that they perhaps didn't enjoy as much before, once they've experienced them in a more A-level context. In English language, on the other hand, there's no literature to read. Instead, the focus is on analysing non-literary texts, including conversations and online texts, and on linguistic theory about issues such as gender, youth dialect, politically correct language, language change, how children learn to speak and write, and so on. Right, so try to answer the second question, are they similar to GCSEs? Well, English literature is similar to the study of literature at GCSE, but with more opportunity to discuss and debate the text with other students who enjoy them. Greater focus on ideas and arguments rather than just closer analysis and sort of analytical paragraphs you've really focused on at GCSE. You can also take the books into the exam, which is a massive difference, of course, so there's much less focus on the need to memorise quotations. English language, on the other hand, is markedly different to your GCSE study of English language. While it retains the need for analytical skills, gives creative writing opportunities, it also covers more social linguistic theories, as mentioned on the previous slide. That side of the course requires similar skills to subjects such as sociology and psychology, which can complement the study of English language well, and people often choose them together. What will they help me study at university if that's your choice of what to do next? Well, clearly there are specific and related courses for both subjects. English language is useful for journalism, marketing, advertising, linguistics, speech therapy courses. English literature is particularly useful for literature degrees, law degrees, arts and humanities, subjects such as history, geography, philosophy, fine art, those sorts of things. So you might want to study a degree that's very closely related to your English A-level, but both are also very well regarded as quality, rigorous A-levels that support applications to study other subjects at top universities. If we look at the table on the next slide, you'll see just what a few of last year's English A-level students are now studying their first year at university, to see what a range of things you might go on to study that English will help you achieve. Okay, so if we look at this slide, you can see that there's the three columns. On the left-hand side, we have the English Literature A-level, and have a glance down now and see what they're studying and where. Okay, so hopefully you've seen there's a big range there. So pause it to look if you want to read this without me talking over it. But we've obviously got English literature, but we've got philosophy and law and history and zoology and fine art and German and linguistics. And clearly I could have picked a range of other things that people go on to study. English language A-level, well, this year, as you can see, there weren't any people who were going on to study a linguistics course, a pure linguistics or English language course at A-level. In the current upper six, are people applying for that, but this year there weren't last year. So we have people studying psychology and again philosophy, theology, or a bit like RS, digital film production, marketing, law and business again, and quite a lot of nursing. There's a couple of examples here of different types, adult and child, but for whatever reason, it seems as a subject seems to attract people who want to go on to study nursing too. And then people who studied both A-levels, both English A-levels, are separate. Two of their 4 that they started with, and 2 of their 3 that they finished with. So at the top there, we've got Emma, who's doing English at Oxford, Morgan, who's doing English at York, another top university, and Alice, who's doing creative writing and English at Winchester. But again, also we get a range. There's adult nursing at Bournemouth, there's business and management at Bournemouth, there's psychology at Bangor. Again, a big range of things that people ended up doing. Okay, and the final question that we're trying to answer was how to decide between them. Well, obviously, some people choose to do both, and then you don't have to decide. But you might not have space for that. You might have, 3 others in mind that you really want to study too, to start with. So then, unless you have a very specific career or degree in mind already, like you want to study speech therapy and work in that area, or you want to study journalism, or you want to study English literature at university. Unless you're looking at something like that, you should choose between them based really on what you enjoy doing most. What have you enjoyed so far in your GCSE lessons? If you've enjoyed reading the novel, discussing and writing about ideas raised in the poetry, or the plays indeed, then take English literature. If you enjoyed analysing journalistic and media texts and the creative writing options, both in fiction and non-fiction, then English language might suit you better. Look closely at the slides on the course content too, and they follow the exam results on the next couple. But that will give you a greater idea of what you actually study. Okay, so here are the English literature results for the last 3 years. Now, I've put the 3 years up because obviously the 2020 results, even though we think they reflect a very, very fair and rigorous grading system that we applied, people could question that. But if you look at 2020 and then you glance down to 2019, you can see the results are nearly identical. In fact, 2019 is just slightly better on the A star to B. And looking at that in English literature, over 90% of the last 2 years on A star to B. 100% pass rate, 100% A to C. A star to C indeed. Taking you back to 2018 to give you a sort of a wider way of judging that, because not every cohort is 90% A star to B, but that's where we're aiming to be all the time, and it really depends who ends up studying it. But there's good value for whoever does. If you look at the top where it says ALPS value, ALPS is a national measurement system, as a company that runs it, that compares the college achievements across the country. And what they look for is value added. They don't look at just the end result. They look at the end result compared to the results that people came into the college with. Okay, and our overall results are superb, as you can see, but our value-added results are outstanding. Okay, so what it suggests is that if you come to Bay House and you study English literature, and it's the same for English language, as you'll see in a minute, then you will do significantly better than people with your GCSE results would be likely to do in other colleges across the country. Okay, English language, again, give you a moment to have a glance down that, pause at any points. And again, as you can see, it's very strong, 100% pass rate, very strong A star to C, 100% this year, well over 90% last year, 85 the year before. And you can see the A star to B's there. Not quite as high as the literature, but you'll note that the value added rating is exactly the same. So whatever you go into this with, in terms of your GCSE level, you're going to come out again with a great deal of added value. So as we saw in the slides showing where people are at now, we get people who have gone on who may have secured a B or C grade and gone on to study a very good course at a very good university in the subjects of their choice, and others who have come in maybe with higher English grades and they've gone on to achieve their A stars, and you've seen that there's some at Oxford and York and lots of other outstanding universities, to be honest. Okay, so it's all about what you bring to it, and English language is a slightly different sort of a subject and really rewards the hard work as well. Okay, so we need to look at the courses separately now and look at what is in each one. They are completely separate courses. They don't go together. So when you're considering which 4A levels to choose, don't just be thinking, I'll do English. Okay, so it started with English literature. We follow the Edexcel Pearson specification if you want to look that up. And this is the lower 6th year that you can see here. So students will study 4 literary texts, which make up part of all 3 A-level components. So we do a little bit of each in the lower 6th year. We don't just study on one, focus on one genre. So we do the non-Shakespeare tragedy play. Okay, so you can see a couple of those at the top there. So this year, 2 groups are doing A Streetcar Named Desire, which is an American 20th century tragedy. The third group is doing Dr. Faustus, which is an Elizabethan tragedy by Christopher Marlowe. Okay, so it comes down a little bit to teacher choice there, but the fact that it's a play and it's not Shakespeare and it is tragedy, all that's required. It's an open book exam. As I said before, they are all open book exams. You don't need to memorize quotations, though a very good knowledge of the play is very useful. Component 2 is the prose study, and for this you'll study 2 novels, and you study both of those in the lower 6. We had those on a previous slide, the pictures of them. The reason we look at them both is because it's only one essay question which asks you to compare the 2 novels. Again, open book, so you'll be able to look things up. And you will practice writing comparative essays on a range of titles, and you will read the novels together. Okay, particularly the first one, which this year all 3 groups are studying Dracula and The Little Stranger. Dracula is the older Victorian text, so we tend to read a lot more of that in class, and ask you to read the modern 21st century text at home. It's a lot more accessible, I guess. And then we do a lot of that as discussion. But each time we will expect you to read, for example, the next chapter. We'll say, okay, next lesson's on chapter 4 in Dracula. We're looking particularly at the setting. Read it ahead. And then in class, we'll read the key parts together and we'll discuss it, and you'll have questions that you'll be able to bring to the lesson because you've already read those. Okay, I'm a great believer that the quicker you read these books, quicker than any teacher would make you do so, the more you're going to enjoy them. You've got to enjoy the book firstly as a book, as a novel, as it was first intended, before you start pulling it apart in order to write about it in an exam. It's personal opinion. If you want to just read at the rate that the class is going, that's okay. But you'll probably end up with a few spoilers after a while. So yeah, reading to the end of these books is a great idea. Component 3 is poetry, and again in the lower 6 you study half that. You study the modern poetry. So 21st century anthologies are very modern. It's from the first decade of the 20th century, from a book called Poems of the Decade, published by Forward Poetry. What you do in that exam is you compare it to an unseen poem. So of course we'll practice looking at unseen poems too. You'll be given the poem on the paper. Again, it's printed for you, so you don't have to memorize it. And you'll be given the unseen poem as well, and some time to read it and think about it and consider how they compare. And obviously a title which might ask you to say, compare how the 2 writers explore adolescence, is a title we recently did, in the poem that you know and this unseen one. Okay, so there's one comparative essay on that named poem from the collection you studied and an unseen poem. Okay, that's the lower 6th year, 4 literary texts in total. Okay, the upper 6th year, there's 20% coursework in the A level, which we'll come back to in a little bit. You study another 4 literary texts, and of course, the 4 that you've already studied, we will also have plenty of time to revise. So in the drama unit, there's a Shakespeare tragedy. There's no requirement to compare it to the other one. There are 2 totally separate questions. But your knowledge of tragedy as a genre will help you answer both of them. You'll write 1 essay on each text. There's also an anthology of critical essays about Shakespeare and tragedy to help you. And for the Shakespeare, not for the other one, you'll start to bring in critics' views and to quote them as well as to quote Shakespeare. You can see at the top there the 2 plays that have been studied this year, Hamlet and Othello. King Lear has also been studied. You will only study 1 of those. And again, that comes to a teacher choice, but only out of those 3 really. Okay, and they are all Shakespearean tragedies. The prose is exactly the same two books, Dracula and the Little Stranger, and we will return to those and revise some more of the context, perhaps read some critical theories so you get other people's ideas, just get to know it a little bit better than you were able to do in the first year. Okay, and the poetry section exam at the end, the new section is a named poet, author Gutzler and Christina Rossetti, who's a Victorian poet this year, but there are other options, so it's the teacher may choose. And again, the two sets of poetry are not comparable at all. Section A is the 21st century one compared to an unseen, and Section B, you're writing about at least 2 poems from your named collection, in this case on Rossetti, and they'll give you something to look at. So how does Rossetti explore loss in Goblin Market and one other poem that you have studied? And within that, you don't even need to compare those 2 poems. You're just writing about both of them. And again, the books are there for you. You don't have to memorize them, and you can choose, therefore, the poems that suit the question better rather than the poems that you've memorized like your GCSE. The coursework then, you have a free choice of texts to study at coursework. We teach you one. We tend to do that in the start that in the summer term of lower 6 after your lower 6 exams, and moving through into the summer holidays a little bit, but mainly into the beginning of the upper 6 year, you'll be choosing your second text yourself. Okay, we'll give you lots of help, tell you what things people have done before. So for example, this year my group did The Handmaid's Tale together, and they've chosen a range of different texts to compare to that. None of them are doing the same text, in fact. So, we've got 1984 being studied, and A Clockwork Orange, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451. Okay, so there's a lot of different texts, and they're just ones that the candidates have gone off and read and explored in similar genres. Say, I want to write about dystopia, or I want to write about political oppression, or whatever they found that was interesting in Handmaid's Tale. Representation of women, for example, is a big thing. Identity. And then we help them to find a text to choose, or they might just choose their own. Now, if you're feeling really confident, you could ditch The Handmaid's Tale, for example, and just do 2 entirely of your own. And we do have a couple this year, again, who have chosen to do that. Okay, you're writing an essay of about 2,500 to 3,000 words. And as I always say, that sounds like quite a lot, but actually it's far less than you think. And even for a first draft, most people are struggling to keep it down to that amount of words. Okay, and that's the literature course in a nutshell. Why choose English literature? Well, as discussed above, English literature is both an enjoyable course in itself and one that offers a gold standard A-level. Top universities recognise it as a sign of academic excellence. It's on their little list of facilitating subjects for whatever course you're applying for. Normally, on an open evening, you get the chance to meet some of our fabulous students. Clearly, in this context, you can't. So I've just put down a few quotations. I've asked some groups to pass these on, and some students, from last year. And this is what they've sent to me. Now, there are loads to choose from, lots of different possibilities, but here are some. I am not going to read them out. You can notice that Libby and Rachel there are previous students who are in their first year at university now. One studying English at Winchester, one studying fine art at Falmouth. And the others are current upper 6 students, and you can see the range of subjects that they're interested in applying. A couple of English-related ones, but we've also got law, we've also got neurological sciences. Okay, as I said, if you pause it at this point, take some time to read, though, please do, because their words are quite compelling, I always feel. Okay. Just a little bit of extra information. In normal circumstances, the English department runs several trips each year for sixth form students. Literature students have had the opportunity to watch theatre productions on set texts. Ones that come to mind are The White Devil at Stratford, Ian McKellen as King Lear in Chichester, Dr. Faustus at the Globe. Clearly there were others, and it really depends what we're studying. A Streetcar Named Desire last year in Southampton, for example, which I really should have put on there. We also attend relevant conferences at Southampton University. They run these conferences each year, which we make people aware of, but they're not always relevant to the course that we're studying. So we'll take a group if it's relevant to what we're studying. For example, they did one on Gothic a couple of years ago. Cinema screenings are things that we encourage people to go to, and sometimes run sort of little mini trips to, just over to Gunwharf or something. If they're running film adaptations, for example, The Great Gatsby, The Little Stranger last year, screened versions of plays, both live ones, but also ones that have been on a few years ago sometimes, so get repeated. The Cumberbatch, Miller, Danny Boyle, Frankenstein, for example. Important author interviews and events, Margaret Atwood's literary event to celebrate the release of the Testaments last year's Upper Sixth. Went to that and thoroughly enjoyed that as a really rigorous academic, but also quite funny experience. We run relevant university trips. There's an annual study day held by Brasenose College in Oxford, for example, for potential applicants from state schools. Over recent years, 2 students, one of them just last year, so she's in the first year now, have been inspired to successfully apply to study English at Oxford by attending this day. They weren't sure at all beforehand. And if you want that in one of their own words, that's Becky, you can see there in the picture, just click on the link there from saying Brasenose Study Day. And it takes you to a page from Brasenose website in which she talks about how effective it was for her. We also bring professionals in when we can from the workplace to talk to students through related careers that may interest them. We just sort of got going on that really. Summer 2019, we had a former student who works for Penguin Random House, ran a whole day's event on working in publishing with practical tasks, good advice for students from both English subjects actually. Clearly we couldn't run that this year, but we'll get back on that. And there are a series of really good careers days that will run by the GFM as a sort of central thing. Okay, and that's it for English literature. So, okay, we're going to move on to English language. So if we go back and forward there. And again, look at the specific course content. All this information for both of them is also on the Bay House website. Okay, so the lower 6 students will study elements of the A-level paper 1 and paper 2. Those are the only 2 papers along with the coursework, but we leave the coursework to the upper 6. But the part of paper 1 that we look at is called Language and the Individual. And on the exam, there are 2 questions requiring analysis of 2 separate texts provided, and a third question requiring the students to compare those 2 texts. So they are unseen texts from a variety of modes. They might be written, they might be transcripts of spoken conversations, they might be electronics or online text, a screenshot of a website or a forum or something from social media even. One of the texts will be from a previous era, so you can compare across time as well as across style. Students will study the language frameworks in detail, such as word classes, sentence level grammar, semantics, phonology, graphology, discourse. It's what you know in terms of looking at language and breaking it down and analysing what the writer was trying to achieve, or the speaker, and that's one of the new bits, and how they use language to do that, whether consciously or no. But there are a lot of new labels to learn early on, and we try to do that in as interesting a way as possible, mainly by varying the text that we're looking at and trying to keep that quite interesting. Language varieties in paper 2 is completely different. So students will be looking at language diversity and attitudes to language discourses, such as gender, accent and dialects. They'll be asked to write an essay from a theoretical perspective and a creative piece, which will probably be journalistic in nature, and they will explore attitudes to these language issues, such as they might write an opinion piece on whether men or women use language differently from each other. Okay, so that's the lower 6 content. The upper 6 year, well, we have the same part in section A of paper 1, that was on the previous slide. And then in section B, you can see students start to learn a theory behind children's language development in writing and in speech, particularly speech, and practice in interpreting empirical data from that. So you might have a little transcript of a mother talking to a child, for example, and be interpreting to what degree the way in which the mother uses language supports certain theorists' points of view about how children learn to speak. Okay, and you are obviously then welcome to challenge those theorist views, and that's what we would encourage you to do as well. It tends to be a very popular area of the course. Paper 2, those same areas, language, diversity and change. So you're still looking at gender, you're still looking at accents and dialects, but then there's more to it, such as youth dialects, political correctness, language change, global English, the impact of ethnicity, which would obviously cross over with both youth dialect and global English. You'll be asked to write an essay from a theoretical perspective and a creative piece, exploring attitudes to these language issues. It'll probably, again, be journalistic in nature. It always has been up to now, and they might set you something like a script of a radio program in which theorists are talking to each other who come from different points of view. So you can show your knowledge of the theory. That's really important, but also you have to have a degree of skill in your own writing, in journalistic writing. Okay, finally, it's 20% of the course is coursework. There's a language investigation and there's a piece of original writing which comes with an explanatory commentary. They're both worth 10% each of that 20%. Okay, so having a look in a bit more detail. So the language investigation, students can choose to pursue an area of individual interest. So we leave that to the opposite. So you've really covered most of the course by that point. And you're partway through covering things like global English with your other teacher. And whatever sort of strikes you as particularly interesting within the subject. And by this point, if you're still studying English language in the upper six, then it's one of your core 3A levels. So clearly you must be enjoying it. So you would pick an area that you enjoy. And you can see a list of bullet points there, which I'm not going to read out. But again, pause the video and have a read of it yourself. In the box, though, a list of examples of some things that people are thinking of doing this year. They're just at the starting point of doing it right now. So there's a comparison of the presidential and vice presidential debates with a focus on the effects of age, ethnicity, and gender, and how, therefore, those debates differed from each other. I guess since they came up with that idea, Trump got COVID, and therefore more of the interactions have been controlled online and so on. So perhaps that might be an area to look at as well. An exploration of the representation of Boris Johnson in the right-wing press, so would generally be supporting him, from pre- and post-COVID-19 eras. So essentially the attitude towards him have changed in some newspapers and not in others. They become more supportive in some, they become less supportive in others. And that's you could look at the text and see how they're using language to achieve that. An investigation into the use of language by teachers of different genders and ages is quite a popular one. Do female teachers and male teachers use language differently when they're disciplining a class or something like that? Do they use language differently to boys than they do to girls, for example? Are they more encouraging to one gender than another? So on. A study of the language acquisition in younger siblings. That can be really useful if you've actually got younger brothers and sisters yourself, or are still at a stage where they're learning to talk or to write and read. So that covers most of infant school as well. The impact of child-directed speech by parents, and you get the chance to collect that data yourself, because you'll obviously be recording, either audio recording or videoing, transcribing conversations that parents are having, maybe that you might be having with a toddler brother or sister or so. Okay, those are sorts of examples that you might do. The other side of the coursework is where you really get your chance to do some creative writing. If creative writing is massively important to you, please don't think that English language is all about creative writing, or even 50% about creative writing. It's got this 10%, but that's quite significant. And it's also got some journalistic creative writing in the exam. So it's there, but it doesn't absolutely dominate. But it's a very good starting point for people who are interested in going on into either journalism or perhaps creative writing courses at university. So as you can see, students choose one of those areas, the 3 bullet points there: persuasion, storytelling, or information, or something that crosses over. And there's some examples of what they might be. So you'll read lots of style models with your teacher, you'll find style models yourself, you'll explore them, talk about them, write a little bit about them, and be talking about how the writers of that particular type of piece tend to use language. And then your job then is to find a style model of your own that you really enjoy. One that you think, yes, I really like this. I'd like to write in a similar style myself. And then that becomes your style model, which you will photocopy and submit as part of your coursework. And then you will write your own piece that uses some similar styles. Clearly, it's not going to be about exactly the same thing, but it will use some similar styles. And you might also differ from it in particular ways. And those are the sort of things that you'll put in your commentary. 750 words in which you're writing about what did you do that were similar and different to your style model. Why did you do that? What were you trying to achieve? Okay, examples. Again, this is from this year. So an opinion article for The Guardian on the presidential election. It's always popular when there are elections coming up. Brexit was very popular last year, for example. An online music review for Pitchfork, which is a music review website, if you don't know it, on Dave's psychodrama. A thriller prologue in the style of Gillian Flynn. You can see that sharp objects one up the top there. A humorous piece of travel writing in the style of Bill Bryson. And, there are obviously lots of others, but you can see that's quite a big range, even amongst those four. Okay. So, why choose English language? As discussed above, and similar to literature, language is both an enjoyable course in itself, and one that offers an excellent A-level that prepares you to study many possible courses at university. Obviously including those very English languagey ones, linguistics, journalism, creative writing, but also the humanities and arts in general, as we said on a previous slide, like history, geography, and things like that. It is a very good A-level that universities like to see on anything that you're applying for, because it shows that you have good analytical and communication skills. A small selection of student opinions, this time from current students and teachers. Okay, so I'm not going to read them out, but it's bookended by teachers. So you got Mrs. Simpson, head of English, and an A-level English language teacher for some years. And at the beginning and at the end, Mr. Walway, deputy head of sixth form, also an English language A-level teacher. In between, there are a mixture of lower six and upper six students. Please do pause it and have a good read of those. Okay, the extra information from literature, from English language rather, is in some ways similar to literature. We've again got the thing about the students coming in, former student coming in and talking through a career. And that was Penguin Random House. If you didn't watch the literature part of this presentation, it's part of the bottom there. That was a whole day event for both English language and English literature students, taking them through how to get into publishing and giving them some tasks that you would have to do in publishing and so on. Relevant study days and university events such as Southampton University and the Brasenose Study Day again there. Again, if you want a bit more information on the Braces, follow the link, although that is Oxford specific. There are also conferences that English language tend to run that don't pop up so much in literature. When they're good and they're relatively nearby and have good major figures in linguistics, such as David Crystal there, then we've been along to those, and they are very useful, really help the students to understand certain key areas of language discourses, the theory in particular. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this. If you have any further questions on either course, please either visit the course links, and there's a link to it there on the Bay House website, or email me at gtab@bayhouse.gfmat.org. Okay, anytime, I'm very happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.